Hi, everyone. My name is Nicole Jacobs. I work for Energy in Depth Northeast Marcellus Initiative. I'm out of Hughesville, Pennsylvania, in Lycoming County, so I'm also one of Senator Yaw's constituents. And I just wanted to first thank you all for coming to the screening of the film. We really appreciate your attendance, and we hope you're able to get your questions answered today. We'd also like to thank Senator Yaw and his staff for sponsoring this event and their help in organizing it. Definitely couldn't have done it without you from Williamsport area. So, with that said, I'd like to introduce our panelists and get started so that you guys can get your questions answered in a timely manner. We do have a couple of the people who were seen as experts in the video. The first of which is former Secretary John Hanger with the DEP. He is now a consultant with Eckert Siemens. Scott Roberts was also seen in the video, and he is also retired with the Department of Environmental Protection. We also have Gary Swan, who's the Director of Government Affairs and Communication with the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau. Lou D'Amico is the President and Executive Director of the Pennsylvania Independent Oil and Gas Association. And then Shelley is also here and available to answer any questions you might have about the film or the wells that she has on her property. So without further ado, I'm going to put the microphone in the middle of the room and open the floor up for questions for our panelists.
I have two questions, both dealing with the word exemption. If everything is true from the movie, why is it necessary for Marcellus shale drilling to be exempted from the Clean Air and Clean Water Acts? And number two, why was it necessary for Bucks and Montgomery County to be exempted from Act 13 in Pennsylvania?
Go first? Well, I don't believe it's exempted from the Clean Water Act or the Clean Air Act. After all, well, that has to do with the Safe Drinking Water Act. You said, I listened to you very carefully, you said the Clean Water Act and the Clean Air Act. And the Halliburton loophole, which I believe was a mistake by the industry. Sometimes you've got to be careful what you wish for. Because it is in fact being used in the way that we're now talking about to imply that there's a broad exemption from federal law. Discharges from the gas drilling industry to rivers and streams are regulated by the Clean Water Act. The EPA in April just moved forward with authority under the Clean Air Act to promulgate very important and much tighter rules regulating air emissions from gas production, including the issue of methane leakage, which is a significant issue, but different from quote-unquote methane migration. So I understand the point of your question, and I recognize that there has been the exemption, the so-called Halliburton loophole, that deals with the Safe Drinking Water Act. It doesn't really deal with the Clean Air Act at all. Nor does it deal with the Clean Water Act. There is substantial federal regulation of the gas industry. We can argue about whether there needs to be more or less. I tend to, for example, I support the recent EPA rules on regulating air emissions from the industry. And by the way, the EPA may have threaded the needle there. At least some parts of the industry seem to be accepting of that new regulation, and some parts of the environmental community seem to be generally supportive of that rule. So I think the details really matter, but a broad suggestion that the federal government doesn't have any regulatory authority for over this industry would not be correct. Lastly, and then I'll stop and let others jump in if they want, it's very important to also have state regulation and state control. By and large, most of us are much more able to influence our state government than we are our federal government. And I think over time, at least, I think that the role of state government and state regulation is critical. And I know for a fact that our rules in Pennsylvania have been greatly rewritten and greatly strengthened. I personally think there's some continuing pieces of work on strengthening the rules that would make some sense. But there's been a huge amount of strengthening of our rules across the board in Pennsylvania, and the Pennsylvania legislature took further action in Act 13. As to the carve-out of Montgomery County and Bucks County, I understand why that looks, and indeed is to many people, hypocritical. And I think you have to ask those who passed that piece of legislation why they did it, and I'll leave it there for now.
Greg Vitale. I guess I wanted to say I was a little disappointed in the film. I agree that Gaslands was one-sided. I independently explored a lot of those areas myself, talked to many of the people in there, but I think this is equally one-sided. My first question, right at the end, I just noticed in the credits, Truthland funded by several natural gas companies. And I guess I was disappointed that when I came in, this was portrayed as a movie made by a mom, without, just on her own. So I just wanted to talk about, could you answer how this all came about, what gas companies funded it, what they paid, what your interaction is with these gas companies?
What my interaction is with the gas companies?
Well, first, I guess my questions are, what gas companies funded this? What was paid? What's your interaction with those companies, and so forth?
It was funded by the association, the Independent Association of America, okay? I had nothing to do with it. I was not paid to do this, nor were any of the people in the movie paid a penny to appear in it.
So I'm trying to get at who paid what sum of money? It said, your film said Truthland funded by several natural gas companies. I'm just trying to get at
for
what
the filming.
Right.
Okay, and I had nothing to do with that, and I have no information regarding any of that. The association put the bill. Obviously, I am not that talented to.
No, when you say association, you mean what associate? Just thresh that out a little bit if you could.
Wouldn't you know, I left my notes back there. I believe it's the Independent Petroleum Association of America.
And how did you come about getting into this film?
How I got into it was the JLC from New York State, the Joint Landowners Coalition, okay? They contacted me. They had been contacted by the film company saying, we're looking for someone who would be a person to interview these people. The head of the JLC, longtime friend, family friend, knew that, number one, I grew up in New York State, just across the border in Conklin. When I got married, I moved across to the Pennsylvania side. He knew that we have a dairy farm, and we still dairy. We milk our cows twice a day. We are not stopping that. And we were slated to have wells on our property. And our son was just starting in the industry. He knew that we had interest in it. We had concerns because we were going to host this on our property. And we wanted to know how things were actually going to be. We're firm believers in being involved in the process, okay? What was going on our hill, we were up there every day to find out what was going on, to talk to the people, to find out, what their plan was. Every aspect of it, whether it was the guys coming in to do the seismic testing or, the drilling, the fracking, all along. So I was contacted by the JLC and asked, would we consider this as a family? Which I went to my family and asked them. And because we we believe it was the right thing to do. We had seen the movie Gasland. I'm from Susquehanna County. I've read part of Blackman's Guide to Susquehanna County. I know that water has been lighting on fire for since we have T-shirts, since 1795 it's been documented.
Oh, okay, I
Okay.
understand. I understand what you're saying. So
And-
the JLC contact.
The JLC, and I firmly believe we've been given a blessing here and our nation needs to be energy independent. And like I said, I wanted to know both sides.
Okay. I'm not going to be argumentative. I just wish we had a film that portrayed both sides. Unfortunately, this one does not. And things like setback requirements, things like preemption of local zoning, things like drilling on state forest land, things like drillers paying their fair share with regard to drilling tax. I think there's a balance here, and regrettably, I don't think this film, suffers from the same sins as Gasland does in simply taking one side and presenting it as the truth, as opposed to presenting a balanced approach. That's all I have. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jeff Schmidt, and I guess I know that the major criticism of Josh Fox's film is that it doesn't provide both sides. It's selective use of information, and I know, for instance, that Secretary Hanger, in the portrayal that Josh Fox had in Gasland, didn't include all of the interview. In other words, it was selectively edited, and I assume that you probably did the same thing in the editing of Truthland.
Actually, you can go on our website and see the complete interviews.
Okay.
They are there.
Well, fair enough. I guess the question I have, though, is I know that, and I have a question for Secretary Hanger, and Scott Roberts perhaps can chime in with him on that, and then one for you, Shelley, is that the DEP, while Secretary Hanger was in office, made a determination that a number of families in the community of Dimmock had their water directly affected by gas drilling. In other words, they made a formal finding that methane had migrated as a result of gas drilling activities. Now, I have traveled to Dimmock. I have sat in the living rooms of many of the families along Carter Road. I've been to Norma Fiorentino's house, where her well blew up on New Year's Day in 2009 as a result of this gas that had migrated into her well. And all of them to a person, say that they did not have pre-existing methane pollution in their drinking water prior to gas drilling occurring. And they said that it was after Cabot Oil came in and started drilling that the problem started. And DEP made a finding that it was Cabot's poor well casing that caused the contamination that occurred, the methane migration in maybe 20-some families. And so I guess the question I have for Secretary Hanger, can you verify, Mr. Secretary, the finding that DEP had as far as the water contamination in the wells? And then I would ask Shelley, why didn't you interview any of the families whose wells only started to have methane problems after gas drilling had occurred, where DEP made the finding that it affected their houses?
Well, yes. Let me start. First, there is an interview in the movie with one of those 18 families, Mr. Saltzman, who clearly says in the movie that once gas drilling happened, methane migrated. He says there was a mistake in the drilling, and the concentrations of gas in his well goes up. Take another look at that part of the movie. I think that's a very important interview, and it is, very frankly, both sides of the story. You saw nothing like that in Josh Fox's story. Nothing like that whatsoever. He goes on to say that the gas company, fixed the problem. I would quickly say, after a tremendous fight involving the regulators, I don't believe that happened easily, but he correctly says that cement was pumped in to fix some of the wells that we suspected, the gas wells that we suspected were causing the gas migrate, and he goes on to say his methane levels went down. And when I left office, that had happened in 14 of the 18 water wells. the methane levels had fallen below the action level. At 4, at the time I left office, still had methane levels above the action level. So the movie does have an interview with one of the 18 families, and the movie does say gas did migrate, and it does say because there was a mistake in the gas drilling, and it does go on to say that the problem was fixed. All of that, as far as I know, is accurate. And I think you would have to say, Jeff, if you looked at that, that's a pretty balanced presentation of that issue. Now, as I said again, there were 4 cases as of essentially January 2011 where methane levels had not returned below the levels that we had set for action by DEP. I personally do not know the status of those 4 water wells, and I'm not privy to the test results. Obviously, the EPA has done further testing at the request of many of the families involved in Dimock, and they have tested for chemicals and other pollutants, and they have reported that the water is quote-unquote safe. They did find some arsenic in one of the water wells at high levels. That is not necessarily a surprise, and is not attributed to gas drilling. So I think the movie does, in fact, state that there was gas migrating in Dimock caused by mistakes in gas drilling. And at least that part of the discussion is balanced in the movie. Now, to Representative Vitale's points, does it cover all of the problems associated with gas drilling? No, it doesn't. It's a 34-minute movie. And it clearly was edited in a way to in essence, rebut Gasland. And specifically that iconic moment of water erupting in a fireball at a tap. That's the point of the movie. It's not a complete discussion by any means of those issues, of all the issues associated with gas drilling.
Mr. Secretary, could you please just answer the question I asked you, which was, how many families did DEP make a determination?
18.
18 families DEP found had methane migration as a result of gas drilling in that area.
Yeah, I said that.
And basically, I know that the gentleman that was interviewed in the movie said that he had pre-existing gas problems in his well. The people I'm referring to are people who all said they did not have pre-existing problems.
I wish we could play the movie. He says, maybe we should replay it. He says specifically, and now I'll stop and let Scott. He specifically says, yes, he had some pre-existing levels,
right.
And he goes on to say that once gas drilling was done, that the levels went up higher.
I heard that. I know.
And he said that there was mistakes in gas drilling. And he's one of the 18.
I know. I just wanted to make sure that DEP was quoted as saying that, because that did not show up in the movie.
Fair enough.
And that's why I want to go to Shally and say, why didn't you acknowledge in the movie that DEP made a finding that bad gas drilling caused methane migration in water wells? But I think I know the answer, but I'd like to hear your answer to it.
Before she responds, I would like to add that as we at DEP engaged and started the investigation of the claims that frac fluids were contaminating water wells, we didn't find any of the chemicals from fracking, but we did find methane.
Right.
When we examined what information we had available, both from Cabot's pre-drilling surveys, whatever they had, and whatever other samples we had of these water supplies, what we found was methane was not tested for. So there was no analytical evidence one way or the other. So all we had were the statements and anecdotal evidence of residents in the area. Some people said we've always had gas, some people said we didn't. None of that evidence was particularly compelling one way or the other. What we knew was we had high levels of methane that we felt were actionable. And we took action. We required Cabot to deal with the problem, as Secretary Hanger explained.
Yeah, we did isotopic testing of the gas to try to differentiate between biogenic, pre-existing naturally occurring gas and gas that may well have migrated from a gas well as a result of gas drilling. And in the case of 18, we found thermogenic gas. And there were other reasons why we made the finding that there were 18 water wells that had been contaminated as a result of methane migrating. And if you think the movie would have been better with an explicit statement that DEP made such a finding, I would agree with you.
Thank you. Shelley, could you tell us why there was no acknowledgement that the state made a finding that 18 separate wells had pollution that was caused by gas drilling?
Lauren stated in what he was telling me, I went to visit him as a landowner, okay? And he told me his story. Now, I live up the road from Dimmock, and I know that there are those that are satisfied with the results of what the gas company has done, and those that are not satisfied with the results. Now, our movie, like this other gentleman asked, why didn't you address this issue and this issue and this issue and everything? And it's like, this was a concise overview to attempt to show the other side of fracking, okay? Could we have gone into more detail? Could I have gone and seen some of these other people? I don't know. Would they have allowed me to? They might have. But I thought that to see the portrayal of one that was affected, admitted right up front, yes, there was a problem. Yes. It was caused by the gas company. Yes, they all knew that. Yes, the gas company was made to come up with a solution and fix it. And there is a viable solution, okay? And I mean, I'm a connoisseur of good water. Our water is phenomenal. And to sit down and have a glass of water with him, somebody said, aren't you afraid of it? And it's like, it was really good. And I'm like, you know, would I have been happy with the results of the water after it was fixed? Yes, I would. I'm sorry that we were not able to do as much detail as you think we should have, but this is a short movie. It's not like Gasland, where you have to sit down with a large block of time. This was short, concise, and to get points out to the general public. You'll notice that as I interviewed the gentleman, their replies were made so that people like I am, you know, I'm not a scientist. I taught science, yes, for years, but I'm not a geologist or a hydrologist or anything like this. And they addressed each issue in a manner so that the common person like myself could understand it. And I think the fact that knowing that Lauren had a problem and it was rectified and he was satisfied says something. Every individual is different. Some people are looking for other things, and you know, some want things taken care of one way, some the other. But what the gas company was asked to do, they responded and they fixed it, and they fixed it well. Now, these other families, that's their choice whether they want to go with the solution or not. But it was made available, and it's still available.
Okay, thank you.
Hello. I'm not a scientist either. I'm not an environmental expert. I'm not a geologist either. But I am just a guy that saw a movie that says this industry is awful, and I just saw a movie that says this industry is great. I want to ask you two guys who were on the front lines for the state, forget the hyperbole of two movies. What concerns you about this industry? What should the average people in this state know about this industry? Is there anything that concerns you moving forward about it? If you would give us a clear answer, minus the hyperbole and the paid films from two sides.
Okay, I can give you a concise answer and talk longer than probably what I'm going to give you if you want. Look, are there impacts from gas drilling even when it's done well? Yes, there's land clearing, and there are some air emissions associated with running various engines, all of which need to be minimized by strong regulation and the use of the best available technologies to control things like compressor engine emissions. Is it an industrial process where there are some level of risk? Yes, it's an industrial process with some level of risk. Some specific issues that I think we can do better at, things like methane leakage, and I believe both the combination of the tighter EPA rules as well as better performance by many natural gas drilling companies, though not quite yet all, is in fact happening on that. I think we need to pay continuous attention to this issue of gas migration. There are a number of wells, a small number of wells, where you have a problem typically with cementing. It's not the casing that does allow some gas to migrate. That's what happened with 18 families in Demick. That is an issue that continues to be important. But I think it's also very important to ask the question, if you're not going to use natural gas, if some people don't want us to do this, what are you going to use instead? What takes its place? I'm a huge proponent of solar and wind, and I think some people who know me in this room probably say that's true, and some would say that's a great thing, and there are others who would say that's not a good thing that I'm a huge proponent of solar and wind. But the fact of the matter is that if you say no to gas, you are saying yes to a number of other things, most of which are not solar and wind. You are saying yes to more coal and more oil. And for the environment, just focusing on the environment for a moment, that's not a good trade. That's not a good trade. Focusing on our national security and our troops, and I'll stop with this, it's also not a good trade to say no to domestic natural gas and yes to oil, about 42% of which is imported. When I had the privilege of serving as the Secretary of the Pennsylvania Department of Environmental Protection, I looked out at my office and I saw the flag flying above the Capitol, and for so many days during my term of office, it was flying at half staff because another Pennsylvanian had lost his or her life in service to our country. And I will go so far to say that one of the reasons that we were fighting wars in the Middle East, two in the last 20 years, is because we import a lot of oil, and it will cripple our economy. So using more domestic natural gas is important not just to the environment, but it's important to our national security. And last but not least, everybody in this room has saved a huge amount of money because of natural gas on their electric bill. If they don't use natural gas to heat their home, they've been saving their money on their electric bill. If they use it to heat their home with natural gas, they've probably saved over $1,000 in this just past winter. And that's a big deal to not just poor families, but to middle-income families. So there's a lot of benefits associated with this that you're saying no to if you stop using natural gas.
One thing that the film gets wrong is the statement in there that in Texas they've been doing this longer than we have, and that is wrong. Edmund Drake drilled the first oil well here in Pennsylvania in 1859, and the first commercial gas well was drilled in Murraysville, Pennsylvania in the 1880s. So we have been doing this for a long time. The experience that Pennsylvania has had from that, I think, leads to the conclusion that it is a process that can be done in a manner that is safe to the public and safe to the environment. However, there are human beings involved with dealing with natural systems. And when you start mixing those two together, either human error causes mistakes, or the conditions that you engineered for don't turn out to be the conditions you find. And that leads to problems. And it is in that group of wells that regulation and laws come into play. And they need to be structured such that when mistakes happen, and mistakes will happen, that the appropriate action is taken to make sure that the affected people are made whole by the person who did the action. I think Pennsylvania's laws have done a good job of that over the years. Obviously, technologies change, And when those change, we need to change our laws and regulations to keep up with them. When the Marcellus came into Pennsylvania, most of the wells being drilled here, and there were a lot, before the Marcellus came in Pennsylvania, there were 60,000 operating natural gas wells in this state. Those had all been drilled vertically. Most of them had been hydraulically fractured, but with lower volumes. The processes we had in place to deal with those wells needed to be changed to deal with horizontal drilling and low and high volume fracking. And I think DEP, both, Secretary Hanger and I were there, and since then, have been trying to appropriately regulate this industry in dealing with it. And I think the General Assembly, after a long debate, said, okay, here are the rules we want DEP to use in doing this regulatory process. So, to my mind, the industry itself is not filled with people that are out there trying to destroy the environment, but it's filled with human beings just like you and I that sometimes don't get the results they want from their efforts. And the measure of people is never how few mistakes they make, but what they do about the mistakes that occur. And that's where I think we need to focus our attention.
May I offer some perspective of a constituency that is really engaged in this, Pennsylvania's farm families. We have about 7.2 million acres in agricultural production. Let me first note, for the benefit of our viewers and in the audience, if you're not familiar with Farm Bureau, we sound a little bit like a government agency, but we're not. Instead, we are a voluntary private organization, fortunately to be the largest of farm families in the Commonwealth, affiliated nationwide. By the way, we have the 19th largest agricultural economy in Pennsylvania among states. Our folks come together voluntarily to solve problems and prevent problems. I'm a helping hand. I come from the farm, but I'm a long time removed from the farm. But I just want to offer our experience because it puts something, I think, it says something about something that may be missing in this, and that's perspective. I don't know how many hundreds of farms we have with oil, or with Marcellus. We have maybe thousands. But let me back up 3 years ago. 3 years ago, the industry came to us proactively, wisely, and said to us, you're going to be hearing a lot about Marcellus, and your folks are going to be interacting with Marcellus, and we want to talk to you about it, but more than that, we want to form a long-term working relationship. And they said to us, as this industry moves forward, if you have issues or questions that come from the countryside, you bring them to us and we will proactively deal with it. That was 3 years ago. And I can say, I saw a line on there say true to the word. That's something we've been saying. The industry has been true to the word. Now, we have no bias here. We have an arm's length relationship with this industry. We have to, because our folks expect it. Let me say one final thing. We have as many farmers or many more in the Commonwealth that have no Marcellus. They're not even in the corridor of Marcellus, but they're excited and supportive of it too. And by the way, we don't do polls. Our members come together in a grassroots organization. We bring hundreds together at Hershey at our convention after 54 county farm bureaus debating issues. And for 3 years since Marcellus, they've come to Hershey at our state convention, 2.5 days of debate, and there's nothing come out of there except support for the industry and, yes, some policies in terms of oversight. And the other reason why farmers outside of Marcellus support it is because there's no industry, well, few, that need more energy than food production. And farmers understand that we have an energy crisis in America. They are risk takers, they are price takers and not price makers. And anything that can help produce food, help them meet the bottom line on their farm, they're supportive of. Now let me just say, to put it in perspective, because we have folks calling us hundreds of times a year on stuff. If we had much going on out there of concern, we'd be the first to hear about it, and I can tell you our phone is not ringing.
Hi, I'm Donald Gilliland with the Patriot News. I have 3 quick clarification questions for Shelley and a somewhat more involved one for Mr. Roberts. 3 quick questions. Shelley, had you seen Gasland before your friend at the Landowners Coalition contacted you?
Yes.
Okay. And when, after your friend at the Landowners Coalition contacted you and said, hey, we've got these people who are interested in somebody to work with them to film, was it their idea or your idea to go to Louisiana, Texas, Colorado?
They set up all the interviews. Obviously, my schedule is much easier to work with than all these gentlemen.
I don't know, you're a dairy farmer.
Well, you know where I am every morning and every night, don't you? But they set up all the interviews and the calendar so that it could be done in a timely fashion.
But did they say to you, hey, you know, Josh Fox went to Colorado, you can go to Colorado? Or did you say to them, Josh Fox went to Colorado, I want to go to Colorado? That's unclear to me. Whose idea it was?
I would say they did, but
Okay.
I guess I didn't know how much liberty I had to, as far as where I went and stuff, but as far as questions, I sat down and said, okay, you know, find out what the area of expertise with each person is, okay? Whether it's...
They didn't limit
dealing
what
with
you
what?
could ask. They
Pardon me?
didn't limit in any way what you
Oh,
could
no,
ask.
not at all.
And my third clarification question is, when you went to Louisiana, Texas, Colorado, were they paying for just the filming, or did they pay for the travel as well?
They paid for the travel as
Okay.
well.
Okay. And Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
your scene in the movie confuses me. It's great video, but I don't quite understand how setting off the explosive charge in the middle of the casings relates to the kind of cementing problems that have been the source of gas methane migration in places like Dimmock. That may be my failing. Could you explain what that connection is?
Well, you know, first, the demonstration in the movie is to give the viewers some glimpse of how a well is constructed. A well is properly defined as a hole in the ground, but it's a little more complicated than just a hole in the ground. And that's the intention there to show it. Now, the issue in Dimmock and in other gas migration cases was that the cement, which is placed between the rock and the pipe,
Right.
you know, and then the next pipe is drilled and there's more cement between the rock and that pipe. The way they constructed the wells at Dimmock, they stopped the cement in an interval below the freshwater string and before they made the turn out to the horizontal leg. So there was no cement there. Gas was able to migrate into that annular space between the rock and the pipe and come up, and then it hit the bottom of the cement on the outside and went away from it.
Okay.
That's one of the changes that Pennsylvania DEP made to its regulations based upon what we saw was, okay, we need to have different cementing techniques, different well construction techniques. Right. That demonstration really doesn't go to talk about that issue.
Okay, and just as a follow-up, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but fundamentally the problems that DEP has seen with Marcellus gas drilling in Pennsylvania have been issues of methane migration. Is that primarily the issue?
No,
No?
not entirely. I mean, we've seen methane migration problems.
Right.
We've seen spills,
Okay.
issues like that. And I know Secretary Hanger and I dealt an awful lot with safety issues early on,
Okay.
worker safety.
Okay, but am I correct in that scene has no real relationship to the kinds of methane migration issues that we see in Pennsylvania? That really is a strength of casing from the inside, and as much of the steel pipe as it is the cement.
It's an explanation of how you design and how you build a well. Now, how that's done, when it's done appropriately, when you've done now what are called triple string casings that we have in Pennsylvania, and when they're cemented appropriately, you're going to prevent methane migrations.
Okay, thank you.
If it's done appropriately.
Thank you.
I'd just like to make a comment. Maybe I can answer your question about, forget about the movies and all that stuff. I live with the gas industry every day. And I think that one of the things that I supported Secretary Hanger when he was secretary with his environmental concerns, and I think that he did a great job of policing the industry. And every time that a fine was levied, that was exactly what DEP should have been doing, I think, in policing the industry and doing their job. I think that one of the questions that I ask all the time is when you come to my area of the state, where we had about half of the Marcellus Shale wells that were drilled in Pennsylvania last year were drilled in my district. Of course, that's going to change over time, but what I tell people that are unfamiliar with the industry is see what you don't see. Because most of the people, and if you read the articles in the paper, that the area I live in is entirely flat and it's all brown and it's scorched earth. I defy you, if you don't know where well pads are, you can't find them. Now, maybe if you follow a truck, you can find it that way, but that's what you will not see some vast amount of devastation. I don't think that the gas industry is any different than any other major industry. It has problems. There's going to be traffic issues. I'm sure that there were people hurt in the steel industry today. Probably, I don't know, somebody may have been killed, unfortunately, but that happens. It happens with any industry, and that's exactly what goes on. One of the things that is really interesting, I think, is that the biggest beneficiary of the gas industry in Pennsylvania has been probably the southeastern part of the state as a result of the reduction in the cost of their fuel for this winter. And we had a hearing recently in Wysock, which is in Bradford County, and that the average cost to heat an average size home with heating oil was about $2,400. With gas, it would have been about $800 this year. So the problem that we face in rural Pennsylvania is we don't have the gas. We can't benefit from it because we don't have the infrastructure to use it, which is one of the big things that we're trying to do, is increase the use of natural gas. And I was very encouraged by Secretary Hanger's remarks about the impact of using imported oil and where our troops are and everything. And I think that one thing that sticks in my mind, and I saw this, I think it came from the Landowners Association in Southern New York, and that is drill a gas well, bring a soldier home. And that really kind of, we have it here, and I think that it can be done safely. And in my experience, where I live with it every day, it's like any other industry. People were learning to live with it. We all had to adjust with time, but I think that it is happening, and you don't see anything any different in your normal day-to-day activities than you see with any other business. Thank you.
All right, we're coming up on our time when we said we would end about 2:45. So I'd like to give each of our panelists just another minute to, make one final comment that you'd like to leave the audience with. I'd also like to thank everyone again in attendance. I'd like to thank PCN for filming and for supplying the microphones, helping us out with the sound today. And the Pennsylvania Independent Oil and Gas Association was one of the co-hosts today, so I'd like to thank Lou and the rest of the association for being here and their part in helping as well. If you're watching from home on PCN and you'd like to see the movie, you can go to truthlandmovie.com. The movie's available through YouTube for free to watch, or you can request a copy of the movie. We have free copies in the back for everyone here if you'd like to take one or two. And as has already been mentioned, please go onto the website and watch the full interviews with each of the experts. When you're making a documentary, you only have a certain amount of time that you're able to put into the film to put it on the DVD, and they had a restricted time, but they did make it available for everyone to watch those complete interviews, and I think that's important to get those full pictures. So, Secretary Hanger, if you'd like to start And then,
Yeah, well, I want to compliment you for doing that, putting the entire interview. I was in Gasland, and I gave a 60-minute interview thereabouts, and it was obviously very heavily edited. And my mother loved the editing because she loves my face, and the close-ups were beautiful of my face. But beyond that, it didn't do a very fair job of representing a really complex issue. And I think there are some problems with this movie, but I do believe on just focusing on the issue of gas migration with the amendment that Jeff Schmidt from the Sierra Club suggested, that it'd be very clear that there were 18 cases, even though there is an interview with one of the 18. I do believe this is a better treatment of just the gas migration issue. It does not address many of the issues that Representative Vitale and others, and Shelley herself said. It doesn't get to many of those issues, but I suspect some of those interviews do. Last couple points. I think it's also really important for people to have discussions like this about our energy choices. And I think when you have the discussions like this about our energy choices, you're going to quickly find that there are some real benefits to each and every one of them. There's some strengths to all of our energy choices, and there's some real weaknesses. I live in the 3 Mile Island evacuation area. I moved in there after the meltdown at 3 Mile Island. I understand the risks that I'm taking with my family by living in that evacuation area. Every Pennsylvanian has some risk associated with their energy use and their energy consumption. But no Pennsylvanian that I'm aware of is saying no to energy. Nobody is not using energy. So you have to come to grips with the impacts associated with these energy processes. And in terms of gas, it's very important that we work to minimize these impacts. And there are some impacts. I personally think the biggest water impact is the gas migration issue. And that has impacted a number of families. But compared to acid mine drainage going into our rivers and streams that have destroyed 5,000 miles of rivers and streams in Pennsylvania, the impacts from gas drilling are indeed minor compared to that. Compared to some other problems like sewage plants that overflow and put raw human sewage into our rivers and streams. Just about every time there is a big rainfall, the impacts from the gas drilling pale in significance. And that's going on in the Delaware River, it's going on in the Allegheny River, it's going on in the Mon River, where raw sewage is going in to our rivers and streams. So the water impacts are not zero from the gas industry. They do need to be strongly regulated. They can be minimized further, but in the list of major impacts on water in Pennsylvania, this industry is not one of the biggest polluters of our water. It just is not. The other thing that I think really bears repeating is something that Senator Yar said about the consumer impacts. I started my career as a legal services lawyer representing low-income families in the city of Philadelphia, my legal career. I had the privilege of representing very good people who were very poor and who had their gas service and their electric service and sometimes their water and sewer service shut off because they couldn't pay the full amount of the bill. These were not deadbeats. These were people who in some cases were 65 years old, living on Social Security, disabled. They were single moms with a kid or two who often were working as school crossing guards but had incomes well below the poverty level. And those families, when the service was shut off, used dangerous heating substitutes like candles. They bring candles into the property. They bring kerosene heaters into the property. And there were a number of fires in Philadelphia, and it's happened outside of Philadelphia. It's happened in central Pennsylvania as a result of the shut off of gas service or electric service that caused the deaths of children. Not a small number of deaths. I counted them for a period of time, and it was up to 43 dead children after utility shut-offs because they couldn't pay the gas bill. Now, there is no government program that exists today that delivers $1,000 worth of savings per winter to every family in Pennsylvania, including those who desperately need that. That savings to me and my family is very nice, and I'm thankful for it. But it's not the difference between having gas service and not having gas service. But for many, many Pennsylvanians this winter, that was the difference between having gas service and not having gas service. So there are issues that need appropriate focus and attention around concerning gas drilling, but let's not lose track of the considerable benefits that are also being produced by this industry.
My name's Lou D'Amico. I'm president of the Pennsylvania Independent Oil and Gas Association, one of the two industry groups here in the state. In spite of my boyish good looks, I will tell you I've been in this industry, this is my 40th year. Much of that period of time I actually worked in the field, worked on drilling operations, fracking, completion operations. This is an industry that has fed my family and taken care of an awful lot of folks in western Pennsylvania for many years. One of the things that I feel that has struck a nerve with the Marcellus when it first began here in Pennsylvania is the fact that it moved into areas where we had never had any kind of natural gas drilling development before. I think people were naturally afraid. At the same time, I think there were groups out there, not only here in Pennsylvania but nationally, whose mission was to undermine people's confidence in our ability to develop natural gas resources in Pennsylvania. Every day we see it in the media, we see it in misstatements, we see it in, frankly, in some bold-faced lies. I like the fact that now we have an organization, Energy in Depth, that's made the efforts they have to reach out and educate. My organization, thanks to dramatically increased membership from folks who participate in the service industries that relate to natural gas, we've given, we are in a position where we can be far more effective on public outreach efforts and education efforts so that people will get the other side of the story. I think Truthland, are there some weaknesses? Yeah, there's a lot of things. I'd like to make a 3-hour movie about this industry and really hammer on some of the things that the Josh Foxes of the world and some other folks have come out with that are blatant nonsense. There are some weaknesses in this movie, but I think for this purpose, and that was to directly look at the misstatements and the misdirection of what went on in gas land. It serves that purpose, and I certainly want to thank Shelley for her time and energy. For a farmer and school teacher to undertake and get involved in this, I think is very admirable.
A question is sometimes asked us at the Pennsylvania Farm Bureau about the farm families that have Marcellus on the farm. The question being, will this lead to them actually ending their livelihood in farming and therefore reduce this robust industry that we have in the Commonwealth in food production? And it's hard to predict the future, but here's what we've observed and learned in the short time since the development of the Marcellus industry. Farming is more than a way of life. It is traditional. It is generational. They're there because they love it. It's part of their culture and their heritage. This is like a life raft for those families. It's a life raft against the risks, and we talked about the risks: weather, prices, markets, infestation. Our dairy industry, which is the 5th largest in the country, went through an economic crisis beginning in 2009. We lost 600 farms. A lot of the folks that have Marcellus on their farms right now were as deep in debt as they can get because of that 4-year crisis, and this will help them survive. So, short story, we think if anything it may change the nature of their farm. An older farmer may decide that they don't want to milk the cows 7 days a week, 2 times a day, and so they start raising beef cattle. And what's wrong with that? But we don't see a profound change in terms of how that land is used, particularly if we have the next generation in the family coming on for food production.
My turn?
Doesn't matter to me who pays the bill. The truth is the truth. And to me, the whole essence of the opportunity in front of us is prosperity. I was told a long time ago that Pennsylvania was blessed with the 3 items that any society relies upon as the foundation for its prosperity: agriculture, forestry, and minerals. This deals with that minerals part of it. If you go out to the rotunda of the state capitol and look up, you'll see one of the big murals up there. It's called the Spirit of the Light, and it's about Pennsylvania's petroleum industry. It was one of the mainstays of our prosperity from the 1860s until probably the 1970s. It languished and now has come back. This is about prosperity, and I would encourage all of you to take a trip to Towanda or to Williamsport or to Waynesburg and look at those communities and look at the vibrancy and look at the well-being that's being created for the people that live in some areas that government tried for 50 years to find some way to revitalize. That's being done because of properly done natural gas exploration. It can't be done sloppy, it has to be done right. But it can be done right, and when it's done right, it creates opportunity for my kids and my grandkids, and that is important.
When I stop and think about all the different ways that it's affected our lives, and you weigh things out, and we have determined that the benefits have far, far outweighed the inconveniences, the truck traffic, the dust, the roads. Our Pennsylvania roads have never been so good. The gas companies have taken an interest in our communities, not building the roads back to the way they used to be, but improving them. It's incredible. They're taking an interest in our communities, in our healthcare, in our new hospital that will be going up in Montrose. They're taking an interest in all of us, and people say, "Oh yeah, well, you've got wells on your property. You're getting royalties now." Yes, we are. And people think, "Oh, you're rich." No, we're not. But what we have is more than what we did. There was a time when gas was very high, and that was wonderful. The people that were getting royalties, it was such a blessing for them. Right now, gas is very low, and people say, "Oh, what a bummer." But each one of us, including us, we are consumers. So I can look at that royalty check, which, as Mr. Swan said, the family farms are in tough shape. If it weren't for the royalty check each month, our family, who's been farming for 122 years, would not be able to keep going, even though that's what we want to do. So it's a major blessing, but not just to us, our neighbors. The pad is on our property, but it reaches under many, many properties who have zero land disturbance, zero. But they reap the benefits of it. They have the lower prices to heat their homes. They're getting that check in the mailbox also, even if it's a small property. But they have done nothing to have to get that. Their place is virtually undisturbed. Our property, yeah, there's a well pad there. The only flat field we owned, but that's okay, because the benefits far outweigh the inconveniences. We are very thankful for the natural gas industry, what it has done. I see the mom and pop stores around us at the end of our road. They wouldn't be going now if it weren't for the natural gas industry and the guys that are there buying lunch every day. The person that had to buy another lunch wagon to go to the rigs and hire another person to man it. The hotels in our area. And you say, well, you don't have many. No, we don't. But the ones that are there are full, and new ones have been built, and they are full. The restaurants, the gas stations, the guy that comes and empties the porta potties on each and every well site. The trickle-down effect, because of the interest in our area, is incredible. Someone gets a check, they might go out and buy a new piece of equipment, which is, by doing that, someone else has a job. Or they might go out to dinner more often. That waitress appreciates that tip that they're able to leave, because we have been blessed. We can bless others. And we are exceedingly thankful. And I am thankful for the opportunity to go and talk to these people and that they were honest with me and told me the way it was. Because a lot of people don't have that opportunity. It was a short movie so that people would watch it. It's to reach out to the vast groups of people and show them there is another side, and we need to investigate, and we need to pursue it. Like the gentlemen have said, there is no energy source that is perfect. Technology keeps going forward. We don't want to go back 50 years. Not a one of you would want to go back on Orville or Wilbur. Let me try that again. We'd go back to the airplane that first flew at Kitty Hawk. Who would want to fly on that? Technology has advanced. We advance. Our needs advance. We have to keep up with that. We could have wind, we could have solar. What do you think the disturbance is on that? The chart that Michael Weber had there saying that for unit of energy, natural gas uses far less water than solar or wind. Very few people know that. They think, oh, there's a windmill. Isn't that great? Well, you know how many windmills would have to cover our farm to get the same amount of energy as that well pad there, and one pad that could have up to 10 wells on it there. I'm looking at it going like, it's a no-brainer. This is something we need, and it's here, and it's now, and it creates jobs for people in our area. Walter Brooks, his farm would have been gone. I know that for a fact. He couldn't pay those notes. It was going after all those years till the gas company came. And you will find that people are very thankful, and we need to give them a chance. We need to trust the people, the experts, to keep us in line, to keep us advancing, and to take us on to the next step. Gas will progress with it. The industry will. How we use it in our day-to-day lives. And I just want to say thank you for this opportunity to come and present this.
Good job.